In a galaxy where strength is measured by the size of your claws, the sharpness of your fangs, and the thickness of your armor, humanity seemed like a cosmic joke. When the Galactic Council first encountered humans, they laughed. Here was a species with no natural weapons, thin skin that bruised at the slightest touch, and bones so fragile they could snap under pressure that would barely scratch a Krillian child. The laughter grew louder when they learned that humans needed to sleep for 8 hours every day, required a specific mixture of gases just to breathe, and died if they went without water for mere days. What kind of apex predator was this weak, pathetic creature that called itself human? They were about to find out that evolution's greatest trick wasn't giving a species bigger claws or thicker skin. It was giving them something far more terrifying. A mind that never stopped hunting, a spirit that refused to quit, and an ability to turn anything into a weapon. Marcus Chun was about to show them what happens when you mistake quiet for weakness and patience for surrender. In a universe full of monsters, he was about to prove that the most dangerous predator of all was the one that looked harmless until it was too late. Marcus Chun stood perfectly still as the Krillian warrior's massive claw swept inches from his face, close enough that he could smell the sulfur on its breath and see the yellow infection oozing between its razor-sharp teeth. The creature towered over him, nearly 8 feet of chitinous armor and bulging muscle, its 4 arms ending in claws that could punch through titanium steel. Around them, the training arena echoed with the harsh laughter of dozens of alien species, all enjoying the show. "Look at the little pink meat," bellowed Thekvar, the Krillian instructor, his voice like grinding metal. "It doesn't even flinch. Perhaps it's already dead and just hasn't realized it yet." More laughter erupted from the viewing platforms. Marcus could see them all clearly without turning his head, a skill that had kept him alive in worse places than this. Vorthak shock troopers with their electromagnetic spines crackling, Zalani assassins whose very shadows seemed to move independently, and the massive Gorvani whose dense bone structure could withstand direct artillery strikes. Each species represented the apex of their world's evolution, perfected killing machines that had earned their place in the Galactic Defense Corps through centuries of warfare. And then there was Marcus, the only human in an academy of monsters. "Instructor Thekvar," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying clearly despite its low volume. "Are you going to keep talking, or are we going to train?" The laughter stopped. Every eye in the arena focused on the small human who had just challenged a creature that could literally tear him in half. Thekvar's mandibles clicked in what passed for surprise among his species. "Train." The Krillian leaned closer, his massive head blocking out the overhead lights. "Little meat, this is not training. This is me showing these recruits what happens to prey that wanders into the wrong territory. You cannot fight me. You have no claws, no armor, no weapons. Your species couldn't even survive first contact with a Krillian hatchling." Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying the creature's stance. Thekvar was indeed formidable by any standard. His exoskeleton could deflect most energy weapons. His 4 arms gave him multiple attack vectors, and his massive jaw could crush a human skull like an egg. But Marcus had been watching him for 3 weeks now, studying every movement, every habit, every tell. "You're right," Marcus agreed, taking a small step backward. "I don't have claws." He took another step, his movement so fluid it seemed almost casual. "I don't have armor." Another step, and now he was positioned exactly where he wanted to be. "And I definitely don't have weapons." Thekvar's eyes narrowed. Something in the human's tone had changed, though the Krillian couldn't identify what. Around the arena, other instructors began paying closer attention. Commander Zyaxthala, the Vorthak who ran the academy, leaned forward in her observation booth. "But I do have something your species has never learned to value," Marcus continued, his voice still conversational. "Patience." The word hung in the air for exactly 1 second before Marcus moved. He didn't charge forward like every other species would have done. Instead, he seemed to simply flow to his left, his body moving with an economy of motion that looked almost lazy. Thekvar's first claw strike, launched with enough force to dent steel plating, met nothing but air. The Krillian's momentum carried him forward, exactly as Marcus had predicted. The human stepped inside the creature's guard, moving between its secondary arms with precision that spoke of careful observation and perfect timing. His hand shot out, not in a punch or strike, but in a grip that found the exact spot where Thekvar's exoskeleton segments connected at the neck. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, Thekvar's eyes went wide, and a sound escaped his throat that no one in the arena had ever heard from a Krillian before. A sound of surprise, and something that might have been pain. Marcus had found the nerve cluster that controlled the Krillian's motor functions, a weak point that existed in their anatomy, but was virtually unknown to other species because it required precise knowledge of their internal structure to locate. His fingers pressed with just enough force to disrupt the neural signals without causing permanent damage. Thekvar's four arms went limp. His massive body swayed, no longer under his complete control. The arena fell into stunned silence as the apex predator of Krilla Prime stood helpless, held in place by a creature 1/4 his size. The thing about patience, Marcus said, his voice still calm, still conversational, is that it lets you watch. And when you watch long enough, you learn things. Like how every creature, no matter how perfectly evolved, has vulnerabilities. You just have to be willing to wait for the right moment to exploit them. He released his grip and stepped back. Thekvar's arms twitched back to life, and the Krillian stumbled backward, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what Marcus recognized as distress signals. "Impossible," whispered a Vorthack instructor from the viewing area. "The nerve cluster location is classified military intelligence." How could he know? Commander Zoexthala was asking herself the same question, but she was beginning to suspect the answer. The human personnel files had been minimal, containing only basic biological data and a note that he had volunteered for the exchange program. But looking at him now, watching the way he stood perfectly relaxed despite being surrounded by creatures that considered him prey, she realized they might have made a critical error in their assessment. 3 weeks, Marcus said, addressing the arena in general. "I've been here 3 weeks, and in that time, I've watched each of you train. I've seen your techniques, your strengths, your habits. More importantly, I've seen your weaknesses. Every single one of you has them, because perfection is an illusion. Evolution doesn't create perfect predators. It creates specialists." He turned slowly, making eye contact with several of the alien recruits. The Zilani are incredibly fast and agile, but their bones are hollow to reduce weight. Strike them in the right place, and they shatter. The Gorvani are nearly invulnerable to physical damage, but their dense bone structure makes them slow to react to rapid direction changes. The Vorthacks can generate massive electrical discharges, but the bioelectric organs that create that power are vulnerable to specific frequencies of sound. The silence in the arena had become absolute. Every creature present was realizing the same thing. While they had been dismissing the human as harmless prey, he had been studying them with the focused attention of a predator selecting targets. "You see," Marcus continued, beginning to walk slowly around the arena's perimeter, "your mistake was assuming that because humans don't look like predators, we aren't predators. But on our world, the most successful hunters aren't the ones with the biggest claws or the thickest armor. They're the ones with the best strategies." He stopped in front of a group of Zilani recruits, and several of them unconsciously stepped backward. Humans became the dominant species on Earth, not by being the strongest or the fastest. We did it by being the most adaptable. We learned to use tools, to work in groups, to plan ahead. But most importantly, we learned to turn our weaknesses into advantages. Thekvar had recovered enough to speak, though his voice still carried a tremor. "What do you mean?" Marcus smiled, and something about that expression made several aliens shift uncomfortably. Take our need for sleep, for example. You all see it as a vulnerability. 8 hours every day when we're completely helpless. But do you know what happens during those 8 hours? We dream. We process information, consolidate memories, and solve problems on a subconscious level. We wake up knowing things we didn't know when we want to sleep. Your species gets rest. Humans get processing time. He gestured toward his own body. Our thin skin? It's the most sensitive surface in a galaxy. I can feel air currents that tell me about movement before I see it. I can detect vibrations through the ground that reveal approaching footsteps. I can sense electromagnetic fields that your own bioelectric organs generate. What you see as fragility, I see as a sophisticated sensory network. Commander Zwayaxthala activated her communicator with a quick gesture. Priority message to Galactic Command, she said quietly. Request complete military records for exchange program, participant Marcus Chun. Previous assessment may have been incomplete. In the arena, Marcus had moved to the center of the space, where all eyes could see him clearly. The real difference between humans and the rest of you, he said, is that you evolved to fill specific ecological niches. You became perfect at surviving in your particular environment. But humans? We evolved to survive everywhere. We're not specialists. We're generalists. And that makes us the most dangerous thing in the universe. Dangerous? Thekvar managed to ask, though he was still rubbing his neck where Marcus had touched him. Think about it, Marcus replied. Every species here represents millions of years of evolution on their homeworld. You're perfectly adapted to your specific environment, your specific challenges. But what happens when you encounter something completely outside your evolutionary experience? What happens when all your natural advantages are useless? He spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire arena. You panic. You fall back on instinct. You do what your ancestors did, even when it's exactly the wrong choice. But humans? We adapt. We learn. We improvise. We take whatever we can find and turn it into exactly what we need. A new voice spoke from the viewing area. Interesting theory, human. But theory is not practice. Every head turned toward the speaker. It was Keth Mora, a Zalani instructor whose reputation for speed and lethality was legendary even among the Academy's elite staff. She dropped from the viewing platform to the arena floor, landing silently despite the 30-foot fall. I've been watching this demonstration with great interest, she continued, her voice carrying the subtle hiss that marked her species' vocal patterns. Your knowledge of anatomy is impressive. Your observations about evolutionary specialization are accurate. But can you adapt quickly enough to survive what you have never encountered before? Marcus looked at her with the same calm attention he had given Thekvar. Kethmora was a very different challenge. Where the Krillian was massive and armored, the Zalani was built for speed and precision. Her movements were so fluid they seemed choreographed, and her hollow bones, while fragile in the right circumstances, also made her incredibly fast. I don't know, Marcus admitted honestly, but I'm willing to find out. Kethmora smiled, revealing teeth that were sharp enough to pierce most materials. How refreshingly honest. Most species would boast of their prowess before facing me. Very well, human. Show me this adaptation you speak of. She moved without warning, covering the distance between them in a blur of motion that would have been invisible to most species. Her clawed hand swept toward Marcus's throat in a strike designed to incapacitate without killing. Marcus wasn't there. He had moved at the last possible instant, not away from the attack, but toward it, dropping low and sliding past Kethmora's extended arm. As he passed beneath her, his hand brushed against her ankle, a contact so brief it seemed almost accidental. Kethmora's landing was perfect, exactly as her training had taught her. She spun to face Marcus, ready for his counterattack. Instead, she found him standing exactly where he had been before, hands at his sides, looking as though nothing had happened. Impressive speed, he said conversationally. The file said Zalani could move at approximately 3 times human maximum velocity, but seeing it in person is quite different. Kid Moravround. Something felt wrong. There was a strange sensation in her ankle, a tiny area of numbness that hadn't been there before. What did you do? Pressure point, Marcus explained. Humans have been studying anatomy for thousands of years, not just alien anatomy, but our own. We've mapped every nerve cluster, every vulnerable spot, every way the body can be manipulated. Your ankle has a specific point where pressure can disrupt the neural signals that control balance. The effect is temporary, maybe 10 minutes, but Kethmora tried to move into her combat stance and found herself swaying slightly. Her perfect balance, the foundation of all Zilani fighting techniques, had been compromised with a touch so light she had barely felt it. But for someone whose entire fighting style depends on perfect balance and precise positioning, Marcus continued, 10 minutes might as well be forever. The arena exploded into discussion as the aliens processed what they had just witnessed. The human had neutralized two of the Academy's elite instructors using techniques that no one had seen before, knowledge that shouldn't have existed, and abilities that their intelligence reports had never mentioned. Commander HFY's communicator chirped with an incoming priority message. She accepted it with growing unease. "Commander," came the voice of Admiral Kexthar from Galactic Command. "We have received your request for additional information on the human exchange participant. I'm afraid there was an error in the initial briefing. Marcus Chun is not a random volunteer from the human civilian population." The commander's bioelectric organs flickered with surprise. "What do you mean?" "According to the corrected files, Chun is a former operative from something called Human Special Operations. The details are classified, but preliminary data suggests he has been trained in combat techniques from across human civilization. More concerning, his psychological profile indicates he possesses what humans call tactical intelligence, the ability to assess and exploit enemy weaknesses in real-time combat situations." In the arena below, Marcus was helping Kethmora maintain her balance while the pressure point effects wore off. His manner was polite, almost apologetic, as though he had simply won a friendly game rather than demonstrated the ability to neutralize trained killers with casual ease. "There's more," the Admiral continued. "We've discovered that humans have been observing galactic military techniques for longer than we realized. Apparently, their government decided that if they were going to send a representative to the Academy, they wanted to send someone who could make a good impression. The human military's definition of good impression appears to be somewhat different from ours." Commander Zoyaxthala watched Marcus bow politely to both instructors he had just defeated. Around the arena, alien recruits who had been laughing at him minutes earlier were now watching him with the wary respect normally reserved for apex predators. "Admiral," she said slowly, "I believe we may have underestimated the human species rather significantly." "Indeed. Continue observing, Commander. I suspect our human exchange student is going to teach us quite a lot about assumptions." As the communication ended, Marcus looked up toward the observation booth and smiled. It was the same friendly expression he had worn since arriving at the Academy. But somehow, now that everyone knew what lay beneath it, that smile seemed far more dangerous than any display of claws or fangs. The mockery had ended. The real education was just beginning. 3 days after the incident in the training arena, Marcus Chun sat alone in the Academy's main cafeteria, methodically eating his meal while surrounded by empty tables. The aliens had stopped laughing, but they had replaced mockery with something that might have been worse: fearful avoidance. Conversations stopped when he approached, groups dispersed when he tried to join them, and even the instructors seemed uncertain how to interact with him. He didn't blame them. He had made the classic mistake of revealing too much too quickly. On Earth, his instructors at the Special Operations Division would have called it a rookie error. Show your hand when necessary, but never show your entire hand unless the situation demands it. The problem was, he hadn't been certain what this situation demanded. The Galactic Defense Corps Academy was supposedly the premier military training facility in known space, where the best warriors from hundreds of worlds came to learn advanced combat techniques and interspecies cooperation. The human government had been thrilled to receive an invitation to send a representative. What they hadn't mentioned in the initial briefing was that Marcus would be the only human among creatures specifically evolved for warfare. "Mind if I join you?" Marcus looked up to see Nixura, a Vorthak female whose bioelectric organs had been surgically modified to allow for more precise control of her electrical discharges. She was one of the few aliens who had spoken to him since the arena demonstration, though their conversations had been brief and professional. "Please," Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Though I should warn you, sitting with me seems to be social suicide around here." Nyxera settled into the specially designed chair that could accommodate her species' unique physiology. Her electrical organs flickered in what Marcus had learned was the Vorthack equivalent of amusement. "I'm not particularly concerned about social status. I'm more interested in understanding what happened in that arena. I demonstrated some basic combat techniques," Marcus replied, though his tone suggested he knew that explanation was inadequate. "Basic?" Nyxera's organs pulsed brighter. "You neutralized instructor Thekvar using knowledge of Krillian anatomy that's classified at the highest levels of military intelligence. Then, you countered instructor Kethmora's speed advantage with a pressure point technique that doesn't appear in any galactic database. Either you're the most naturally gifted warrior I've ever encountered, or there's something about human military capabilities that we've been seriously misinformed about." Marcus set down his eating utensil and studied Nyxera carefully. Her question wasn't casual curiosity. There was an intensity in her bioelectric patterns that suggested genuine professional interest. "What's your background, Nyxera?" "Before the academy, I mean." "Military intelligence," she replied without hesitation. 12 years of analyzing enemy capabilities and developing counter-strategies. I volunteered for this exchange program because I wanted to understand how different species approach warfare. What I didn't expect was to encounter a species that appears to have been studying galactic military techniques for considerably longer than we realized. Marcus smiled ruefully. "You're very perceptive." "Yes, humans have been observing galactic civilization for longer than we've officially acknowledged. Not spying exactly, but monitoring, learning. We wanted to understand what we were getting into before we made formal contact." "And what did you learn?" "That every species in the galaxy has made the same fundamental error," Marcus said quietly. "You become so focused on perfecting your existing capabilities that you've stopped learning new ones. The Krillians are incredibly strong and well-armored, so they rely on brute force. The Zilani are fast and agile, so they depend on speed. The Vorthacks have powerful bioelectric weapons, so you use overwhelming firepower." Nyxera's organs flickered thoughtfully. "These are proven effective strategies. Each species has achieved dominance on their homeworld using these techniques." "On their homeworld, yes. But what happens when you encounter an enemy that your homeworld never prepared you for? What happens when brute force isn't enough, when speed doesn't matter, when firepower is useless?" Before Nyxera could respond, the cafeteria's alert system activated. A harsh tone echoed through the space, followed by Commander Zoextala's voice over the communication system. "All recruits and instructors report to Briefing Chamber Alpha immediately. Emergency training exercise is now in effect." Marcus and Nyxera exchanged glances as they rose from their table. Around them, the few other occupants of the cafeteria were moving with the quick efficiency of trained warriors responding to a priority alert. "Emergency exercises aren't scheduled for this week," Nyxera murmured as they joined a stream of aliens heading toward the briefing chamber. "No," Marcus agreed, "they're not." Briefing Chamber Alpha was the largest assembly space in the Academy, designed to accommodate the diverse physiological needs of dozens of species. When Marcus and Nyxera arrived, they found it packed with nearly 200 aliens, all talking in hushed tones about what could have prompted an unscheduled exercise. Commander Zoextala stood at the podium, her bioelectric organs displaying the rapid patterns that indicated high stress levels. When the last stragglers had found seats, she activated the chamber's attention signal, and all conversation ceased. "Recruits and instructors," she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the space, "we have received an urgent request from Galactic Command. A research station in the Kepler 442 system has gone silent. The facility was studying anomalous energy readings from a previously unexplored planet, and their last transmission indicated they had discovered something significant. A holographic display materialized above the podium, showing a three-dimensional map of the Kepler 442 system. A small space station orbited the system's fourth planet, its status indicators showing red for all systems. 3 days ago, contact was lost with Research Station Epsilon. All attempts to re-establish communication have failed. A survey ship sent to investigate found the station intact, but completely unresponsive. Scans detected no life signs, no power generation, and no apparent damage to the station structure. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his attention focused completely on the briefing. This wasn't a training exercise. This was a real emergency, and for some reason, the Academy was being asked to respond. The survey ship attempted to dock with the station. Commander Zexthala continued, but lost contact with Galactic Command immediately upon making physical contact with the station's hull. The ship has not been seen since. Command has classified this as a potential hostile action and is requesting that we provide a reconnaissance team to investigate. Instructor Dekvars Mandibilis Klikid Ludli. Commander, with respect, this academy trains military personnel. It does not conduct active combat missions. Under normal circumstances, you would be correct, the commander replied. However, the nature of this situation requires a team with diverse capabilities and minimal political implications. If this turns out to be first contact with a hostile alien species, Command wants the initial response to come from an educational institution rather than a formal military unit. The logic was sound, Marcus realized. An academy team could be portrayed as a rescue mission rather than a military invasion if things went badly. It would also provide valuable real-world experience for the recruits while maintaining plausible deniability for the various galactic governments. The team will consist of 12 individuals, Commander Zwayaxthala announced. 6 instructors and 6 recruits representing the primary combat specializations taught at this academy. Selection will be based on demonstrated competence, psychological stability, and complementary skill sets. She activated another holographic display, this one showing a list of names. Marcus was surprised to see his own name on the list, along with Nixura's and 10 others he recognized as among the Academy's elite. The selected team will depart in 6 hours aboard the fast courier ship Determination. Mission parameters are reconnaissance and rescue, with authorization to use necessary force for self-defense. Questions. A Gorvani instructor raised a massive hand. Commander, why include recruits on what is clearly a dangerous mission? Because, Instructor Morden, this situation may require capabilities that our instructors don't possess. Each selected recruit brings unique skills that could prove valuable in an unknown environment. Marcus understood. His demonstration in the arena had revealed abilities that the Academy staff didn't possess. If the situation required unconventional solutions, a human's adaptive capabilities might be exactly what the mission needed. Team members report to Equipment Bay 7 for mission briefing and gear assignment, Commander Zwayaxthala concluded. Dismissed. As the chamber emptied, Marcus found himself walking alongside Nixura and several of the other selected team members. The mood was subdued. Everyone understood that this wasn't a training exercise or a friendly competition. People had died, and they might be walking into the same situation that had killed them. Human, called a familiar voice from behind them. Marcus turned to see Instructor Kethmora approaching, her movements as fluid as ever despite the residual effects of their earlier encounter. Marcus, he corrected gently. Or Chun, if you prefer formal address. Marcus, she repeated, testing the pronunciation. I wanted to speak with you about the mission parameters. Your species' adaptability could prove valuable, but I'm concerned about your lack of experience with truly hostile alien contact. With respect, Instructor, none of us have experience with this specific situation. Whatever happened to that research station, it was something new, something that existing protocols and training couldn't handle. Kethmora's eyes narrowed slightly. You sound confident about that assessment. I am. Because if conventional military responses could have handled it, Galactic Command wouldn't be sending an academy team. They'd be sending a battle fleet. The Zalani instructor was quiet for several minutes as they walked toward Equipment Bay 7. Finally, she spoke again. Your tactical analysis is sound, but tactical intelligence is only valuable if you survive long enough to use it. This mission will require more than clever techniques and pressure point knowledge. I know, Marcus replied simply, but sometimes the most dangerous situations require the most dangerous solutions. And humans, as you're beginning to understand, specialize in being dangerous when we need to be. Equipment Bay 7 was a massive chamber filled with weapons, armor, and specialized gear designed for dozens of different species. The selected team members spread out to find equipment suited to their particular needs and physiologies. Marcus found himself at a station loaded with what the galactic database is classified as human-compatible equipment, though he suspected most of it had been designed for other species and modified to fit human requirements. The armor was functional but bulky, the weapons were powerful but awkward in his hands. Unsatisfactory? Asked a voice behind him. He turned to find Commander Zyxthala observing his equipment selection. Adequate for most situations, Marcus replied diplomatically. Though I notice there's no provision for the equipment I'm actually trained to use. Which would be? Marcus smiled. Things that weren't designed to be weapons until someone like me got hold of them. Standard human special operations doctrine emphasizes improvisation and adaptation over specialized gear. Give me access to the station's maintenance supplies and emergency equipment, and I can probably put together more effective tools than anything in this bay. The commander's bioelectric organs flickered with what he was learning to recognize as interest. Demonstrate. Marcus looked around the equipment bay, noting the various tools and supplies available. After a moment, he selected a standard emergency flashlight, a coil of synthetic rope, and a small container of industrial adhesive. Flashlight becomes a weapon by removing the lens and power cell, creating a projectile launcher using the focused beam aperture. He explained, his hands working as he spoke. Rope becomes a restraint system, a climbing aid, or a weapon, depending on how it's knotted and weighted. Adhesive can seal breathing equipment, create friction surfaces for climbing, or incapacitate opponents by targeting their sensory organs. In less than 5 minutes, he had converted 3 innocent maintenance tools into a versatile weapon system that could function in multiple roles. Commander Zyxthala studied the improvised equipment with growing amazement. These are standard human techniques. Basic special operations training, Marcus confirmed. We call it environmental exploitation. The theory is that any environment contains the materials needed to survive and prevail in that environment. You just have to know how to recognize and utilize them. And this is why Galactic Command wanted you on this mission. Probably. Whatever happened to that research station, it defeated conventional military approaches. Maybe what's needed is an unconventional response. Commander Zyxthala was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with the same intensity she would apply to a complex tactical problem. Finally, she spoke. Human, I want you to understand something about this mission. The research station was staffed by 57 of the galaxy's best scientists and protected by a full military security detail. These were not untrained civilians. They were professionals who knew how to handle dangerous situations. I understand, Commander. I don't think you do. The station's last transmission was a distress signal that lasted exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds? Marcus! Whatever they encountered overwhelmed their defenses so completely that they barely had time to call for help. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Commander, in my experience, the things that defeat conventional defenses the fastest are usually the things that conventional defenses weren't designed to handle. If we're going to succeed where others failed, we need to be prepared to try things that others wouldn't think of. And if those unconventional approaches get the team killed, then we'll have learned something valuable about the nature of the threat. Marcus replied calmly. Knowledge that might save the next team and the one after that. Sometimes the most important victory isn't surviving the battle. It's making sure the information needed to win the war survives with you. Commander Zyxthala stared at him for several seconds. Then, activated her bioelectric organs, and the pattern Marcus had learned meant deep thought. Human tactical philosophy is remarkably fatalistic. No, commander. It's remarkably realistic. In a universe full of things that can kill you, the best strategy isn't to avoid danger. It's to make sure that when danger kills you, it pays a price for the privilege. The briefing alarm sounded throughout the equipment bay, indicating that the mission team needed to report for final departure preparations. As the selected personnel began gathering their gear, Marcus noticed something interesting. The other team members were no longer avoiding him. Instead, they were watching him with the focused attention of professionals evaluating a valuable asset. The mockery had ended. The fear was fading. What remained was something far more important: respect earned through demonstrated competence. As they prepared to board the Determination, Marcus realized that the real test wasn't going to be facing whatever had destroyed the research station. The real test was going to be proving that humanity's approach to warfare could work on a galactic scale. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time since arriving at the Academy, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The Determination cut through hyperspace with the sleek efficiency typical of Galactic Defense Corps vessels, its advanced engines pushing the ship toward the Kepler 442 system at speeds that would have seemed impossible to human engineers just decades earlier. Marcus Chun stood in the ship's observation deck, watching the strange light patterns of hyperspace flow past the reinforced windows while his mind processed everything he had learned during the 18-hour journey. The mission briefing had revealed details that Commander Zyxthala hadn't shared with the full Academy. Research Station Epsilon hadn't just been studying anomalous energy readings. According to the classified files, they had discovered what appeared to be artificial structures on the planet's surface, structures that didn't match any known galactic architecture. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the databases, and the initial survey had suggested technology that might be millions of years old. Then, the station had gone silent, along with everyone on it. "Human," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see Zekthar, a Gorvani warrior whose dense bone structure and massive frame made him one of the physically strongest beings Marcus had ever encountered. "I've been thinking about our conversation during the journey, about combat philosophy, about adaptation versus specialization." Zekthar moved to stand beside Marcus at the observation window, his massive presence somehow managing not to seem threatening. "My species has always believed that perfect physical conditioning and superior equipment are the foundations of military success. But your demonstrations have made me question that assumption." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The journey had included several training sessions where he had continued to demonstrate human combat techniques to his teammates. Each session had revealed new aspects of human tactical thinking that challenged conventional galactic military doctrine. "On my world," Zekthar continued, "warriors train from childhood to maximize their natural physical advantages. We build muscle mass, increase bone density, and perfect our techniques until they become instinctive. But you seem to approach combat as a puzzle to be solved rather than a contest of strength." "That's a good way to put it," Marcus agreed. "Human military thinking is based on the idea that every situation has a solution, but the solution might not be obvious until you understand all the variables involved. Physical strength is just one variable. Sometimes it's the most important one. Sometimes it's irrelevant." Zekthar's massive head turned toward Marcus, his dark eyes reflecting genuine curiosity. "Give me an example." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain a concept that seemed self-evident to human tactical thinking, but was apparently revolutionary to galactic military minds. "During our training session yesterday, you demonstrated your species' traditional combat approach. Direct assault, overwhelming force, using your physical advantages to crush opposition before it can mount effective resistance. It's a proven strategy, and against most opponents, it would be devastatingly effective. But it requires that your physical advantages actually be advantages in the specific situation you're facing. What if your opponent is incorporeal? What if the environment makes your strength irrelevant? What if the victory condition isn't destroying the enemy, but protecting something fragile? Zekthar frowned, his heavy features creasing in concentration. These are unusual scenarios. Are they? We're traveling to investigate a research station where 57 highly trained individuals, protected by military-grade defenses, were neutralized in 4 seconds. Does that sound like a situation where conventional physical combat would be effective? Before Zekthar could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Captain Vexthora's voice echoed through the observation deck with the crisp authority typical of Zalani officers. All mission personnel report to the briefing chamber. We are approaching the target system and will drop out of hyperspace in 30 minutes. Marcus and Zekthar made their way through the ship's corridors toward the briefing chamber, passing other team members who were making the same journey. The mood aboard the Determination had grown increasingly tense as they approached their destination. Everyone understood that they were potentially flying into the same situation that had already claimed 2 ships and nearly 60 lives. The briefing chamber was smaller than the one at the Academy, but efficiently designed for the 12-person mission team. Captain Vexthora stood at the central holographic display, her movements carrying the fluid grace that made Zalani such effective ship commanders. Mission personnel, she began as the last team members took their seats. Preliminary scans of the Kepler 442 system show no apparent threats. The research station appears intact and is maintaining standard orbit around the 4th planet. However, we are detecting no life signs, no power generation, and no response to communication attempts. The holographic display showed a detailed image of Research Station Epsilon. It was a typical Class 7 research facility designed to support long-term scientific operations in deep space. Nothing about its external appearance suggested damage or distress. More concerning, Captain Vexthora continued, "We have located the survey ship that was sent to investigate. The vessel is drifting approximately 10,000 kilometers from the station, also showing no life signs or power generation." A new image appeared in the hologram, showing a sleek survey vessel that looked perfectly normal except for its complete lack of any signs of activity. Both ships appear to be physically undamaged. No hull breaches, no evidence of weapons fire, no indication of structural failure. Yet both are completely inert. Instructor Kethmora raised a clawed hand. "Captain, what are the current theories about what might have caused this?" "Galactic Command has developed several hypotheses," Vexthora replied, "but none of them adequately explain the available evidence. Energy weapon attack should leave detectable residual signatures. Biological or chemical agents should still allow for some kind of distress signal. Even complete life support failure would leave technological systems operational." Marcus studied the images carefully, noting details that might be significant. "Captain, have there been any attempts to scan the planet's surface?" "Long-range scans only. The anomalous energy readings that originally attracted research attention are still present, but they're significantly stronger than they were when the station first arrived. Whatever is generating those readings has become more active after the station went silent." "Correct." Marcus exchanged glances with Nixera, who was also studying the display with professional intensity. The timing was suggestive. Whatever was on the planet's surface had apparently responded to the research station's presence, possibly in a hostile manner. Mission parameters remain reconnaissance and rescue, Captain Vexthora announced. However, given the unknown nature of the threat, we will be implementing enhanced security protocols. The team will board the research station in full environmental suits with independent life support. All personnel will maintain constant communication, and any indication of hostile activity will result in immediate evacuation. She activated a new display showing the station's internal layout. The research station has 4 main sections: living quarters, laboratories, engineering, and command. The team will split into 3 groups of 4, each assigned to investigate specific sections while the ship maintains position at safe distance. Marcus raised his hand. Captain, what's the definition of safe distance in this situation? Far enough to avoid whatever happened to the station and survey ship close enough to provide immediate support if needed. Approximately 50 kilometers. And if that's not far enough? Captain Vexthor's expression grew grim. Then we learned something important about the nature of the threat and hopefully live long enough to report it. The mission team spent the next 20 minutes reviewing station blueprints and finalizing equipment assignments. Marcus found himself assigned to the engineering section along with Zekthar, Nixura, and instructor Thekvar. It was an interesting combination. The human tactician, the Gorvani strongman, the Vorthak technician, and the Krillian shock trooper, as they prepared to board the transport shuttle that would carry them to the research station. Marcus made final adjustments to his improvised equipment. He had spent part of the journey modifying standard gear to better suit human tactical approaches, creating tools that could serve multiple functions depending on the situation they encountered. Still refusing standard weapons? Instructor Thekvar asked, noting Marcus's unusual equipment selection. Not refusing, Marcus corrected, supplementing. Standard weapons are designed for known threats. We don't know what we're facing, so we need to be prepared for unknown variables. Such as, Marcus held up what looked like an ordinary maintenance scanner, except that he had modified it with components from 3 different devices. This can function as a motion detector, an electromagnetic field analyzer, a structural integrity scanner, or an improvised communication device, depending on how I configure it. One tool, multiple applications. Thekvar's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was his species' expression of skepticism. And if you need to fight, then I'll use whatever the environment provides. The station has emergency equipment, maintenance tools, structural materials. A human with access to those resources can create more effective weapons than most species can imagine. Theoretical capability is not the same as practical results. True, Marcus agreed as they boarded the shuttle. I guess we're about to find out which one applies. The shuttle's trip to Research Station Epsilon took only 15 minutes, but it felt much longer. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the station growing larger as they approached, its hull gleaming in the light from the system star. It looked completely normal, which somehow made it more unsettling. Ships that had been attacked or damaged showed obvious signs of distress. A ship that looked perfect but contained no life was something else entirely. Docking in 30 seconds, announced the shuttle pilot. All personnel prepare for boarding. Marcus activated his environmental suit systems and checked his equipment one final time. Around him, his teammates were going through similar preparations, each following the protocols of their respective species. The mood in the shuttle had become completely professional. Whatever personal differences or cultural misunderstandings might exist between them, they were all military personnel facing a potentially lethal unknown. The shuttle's docking clamps engaged with the research station's airlock with a solid thunk that vibrated through the hull. Status lights on the airlock control panel showed green across the board. Whatever had happened to the station's crew, it hadn't damaged the basic mechanical systems. Teams Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, proceed to your assigned sections, came Captain Vexthor's voice through their suit communications. Maintain constant contact and report any anomalies immediately. The airlock cycled normally, and the mission team found themselves in the station's main corridor. Emergency lighting provided adequate illumination, but the complete absence of any signs of life was immediately apparent. No sounds of ventilation systems, no background hum of electronics, no indication that the station was anything more than an elaborate tomb. Gamma team proceeding to engineering section. Nixer reported as Marcus's group split off from the others. All systems appear functional, but no active power generation detected. They made their way through corridors that should have been busy with scientific activity. Personal items were still in place. Workstations showed signs of recent use, but there were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened to the 57 people who should have been living and working in these spaces. This is unnatural, Zekthar muttered as they approached the engineering section. People don't just disappear. There should be evidence of what happened. Unless what happened was something that doesn't leave conventional evidence, Marcus replied, scanning the corridor with his modified detector. Or something that specifically removes evidence as part of its nature. They reached the engineering section to find it in the same condition as the rest of the station. Equipment was operational, but inactive. Workstations were configured for normal operations but unmanned. Emergency systems were armed but not deployed. Beginning detailed investigation of engineering systems, Nixera reported to the shuttle. Initial assessment suggests all primary systems shut down simultaneously approximately 72 hours ago. Marcus was studying the main engineering console when his modified scanner began registering unusual readings. The electromagnetic signatures he was detecting didn't match anything in his equipment's database, and the patterns seemed almost organic in their complexity. Team, I'm detecting anomalous electromagnetic activity in this section. The patterns are unlike anything in our equipment specifications. Instructor Thekvar moved to a secondary console, his massive claws surprisingly delicate as he accessed the station's diagnostic systems. Engineering logs show normal operations until timestamp 15 hours, 47 minutes, and 32 seconds on the day communications ceased. Then, all systems simultaneously entered emergency shutdown mode. Emergency shutdown because of what? Zekthar asked. Unknown. The shutdown command doesn't appear in any of the automated logs. Someone or something initiated it manually, but there's no record of who or why. Marcus's scanner was still registering the strange electromagnetic readings, and they seemed to be getting stronger. More importantly, the patterns were beginning to show a kind of regularity that suggested intelligence rather than random natural phenomena. Nixera, are you detecting any bioelectric signatures that might explain these readings? The Vorthack technician activated her own scanning equipment, her bioelectric organs flickering as she processed the information. Negative on bioelectric sources, but I am detecting something unusual. There appear to be electromagnetic fields present that aren't being generated by any of the station's equipment. Generated by what? Unknown. The signature is unlike anything in my experience. It's almost as if the station's hull itself is conducting energy from an external source. Marcus felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up, a human evolutionary response to danger that had served his species well for millions of years. Something about this situation was fundamentally wrong in a way that his conscious mind hadn't fully grasped yet, but his instincts were screaming warnings. Team, he said quietly, I think we need to consider the possibility that whatever happened to the station's crew is still happening. We might not be investigating an aftermath. We might be walking into an ongoing event. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the engineering section went out, plunging them into complete darkness. Emergency lighting should have activated automatically, but nothing happened. The only illumination came from their suits' helmet lights, creating isolated pools of visibility in an ocean of black. Shuttle, this is Gamma Team, Nixera reported, her voice tight with controlled tension. We have lost primary lighting in the engineering section. Emergency systems are not responding. Static was the only reply. Marcus activated his modified scanner again, and the readings nearly overloaded the device's display. Whatever had been generating the anomalous electromagnetic signatures was now present in massive concentrations, and it was moving through the station's systems with purposeful intelligence. Team, he said, his voice carrying the calm authority he had learned in special operations training. We need to leave this section immediately. Whatever's happening here, it's just getting started. But as they turned toward the exit, Marcus's helmet lights revealed something that made his blood run cold. The corridor they had used to enter the engineering section was gone. Where there had been a doorway and passage, there was now solid wall, as if the station structure had somehow rearranged itself while they weren't looking. They were trapped, and something was hunting them in the darkness. Marcus Chin's helmet lights cut through the darkness of the engineering section, revealing walls where moments before there had been open corridors. The station structure had somehow reconfigured itself, sealing them into what might be either a trap or a testing ground. Around him, his three teammates were responding to the situation according to their species' evolutionary conditioning, and Marcus could see that their responses might get them all killed. Zekthar had immediately moved into a defensive posture, his massive frame positioned to intercept physical attacks. Instructor Thekvar's mandibles were clicking rapidly as he scanned for enemies to engage with his natural weapons. Nixera's bioelectric organs were cycling through defensive patterns, preparing to discharge massive amounts of electrical energy at any threat that presented itself. All of them were preparing to fight, which was exactly the wrong response to their current situation. "Team," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority that had kept him alive through dozens of impossible situations. "I need everyone to stop what they're doing and listen to me very carefully." Human, Thekvar's voice carried the harsh edge of adrenaline and combat instinct. "This is not the time for analysis. We are trapped and under attack. We need to find a way out or prepare to fight." "No," Marcus replied firmly. "We need to understand what we're facing before we do anything else. Because I don't think we're under attack. I think we're being studied." He activated his modified scanner again, noting how the electromagnetic readings had changed since the station reconfigured itself. The patterns were more complex now, more organized, and they seemed to be responding to the team's movements and actions. "The energy signatures I've been tracking aren't random," he continued, moving slowly through the darkened space while his scanner processed data. "They're purposeful, intelligent, and they're reacting to our presence. Whatever is generating them has been learning about us since we came aboard." "Learning what?" Nixera asked, her bioelectric organs flickering with the controlled tension of a warrior preparing for combat. "How we move, how we think, how we respond to threats. Look at the timing. The station reconfigured itself only after we had demonstrated our standard response patterns. It waited until we had shown it our reflexes, our capabilities, our individual roles within the team structure." Zekthar's massive head turned toward Marcus, his dark eyes reflecting the helmet lights. "You're suggesting that whatever happened to the station's crew is happening to us right now." "I'm suggesting that we're in the middle of a contact situation with an intelligence that operates in ways we don't understand. The crew didn't disappear because they were killed. They disappeared because something took them, and it took them for a reason." Marcus continued moving through the engineering section, his scanner mapping the electromagnetic patterns while his mind processed the tactical implications of what he was discovering. The energy signatures weren't just present in the station systems. They were integrated into the station's systems, as if whatever they were facing had somehow merged with the research facility itself. "Contact situation?" Thekvar's voice carried deep skepticism. "Human, if this is first contact with an alien intelligence, why has it not attempted communication?" "Who says it hasn't?" Marcus replied, stopping beside what appeared to be a standard engineering console. But his scanner was showing that the console was now generating electromagnetic patterns identical to those he had detected throughout the station. "Maybe communication doesn't work the way we assume it should. Maybe this intelligence doesn't use words or symbols or mathematical concepts. Maybe it communicates by direct interaction with neural systems." The implications of that possibility hung in the darkness like a physical presence. If Marcus was correct, then whatever they were facing could potentially access their thoughts, their memories, their knowledge directly. It could learn everything they knew simply by observing their neural activity. "That's impossible," Nixera said, though her voice carried less certainty than her words suggested. "Direct neural interface requires compatible bioelectric fields and precise frequency matching. The probability of an unknown species having compatible neural structures is..." She stopped speaking abruptly, her bioelectric organs suddenly displaying patterns that Marcus had never seen before. Not defensive patterns, not communication patterns, but something entirely new. "Nixera," Marcus said urgently, "what are you detecting?" I don't know." My bioelectric organs are responding to something, but not to any external threat. It's as if they're resonating with some kind of field that's... She paused, her organs flickering in complex patterns that seemed almost like a conversation. Oh no. What is it? Marcus, I think you're right about the neural interface possibility. Something is attempting to establish contact with my bioelectric systems. I can feel it probing, trying to understand how my organs generate and control electrical fields. Zekthar moved closer to Nixera, his protective instincts overriding his tactical training. Can you break the connection? I don't think it's a connection, Nixera replied, her voice carrying a strange note of wonder mixed with fear. I think it's more like recognition, as if whatever this is has been trying to understand bioelectric field for a very long time, and my presence is providing it with the information it needs. Marcus's scanner was now showing electromagnetic activity throughout the engineering section, complex patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Nixera's bioelectric organs. Whatever intelligence they were dealing with, it was definitely learning from their presence, just as he had suspected. Team, he said, making a decision that went against every instinct his military training had developed. I'm going to try something unconventional. I need everyone to trust me and follow my lead. Human, Thekvar's mandibles clicked warningly. This is not the time for experimentation. Actually, it's exactly the time for experimentation. Conventional approaches failed the station crew and the survey ship crew. If we're going to succeed where they failed, we need to try something they wouldn't have thought of. Marcus moved to the center of the engineering section and set his scanner aside. Then, moving slowly and deliberately, he began removing pieces of his equipment and placing them on the deck in a specific pattern. What are you doing? Zekthar demanded. I'm demonstrating non-aggressive intelligence, Marcus replied, continuing to arrange his equipment. Every species we've encountered approaches unknown situations with defensive or offensive preparations. But humans also have another option. We can demonstrate curiosity rather than hostility. He finished arranging his equipment in a symmetrical pattern that couldn't possibly be interpreted as a weapon configuration. Then he stepped back and activated his suit's external speakers. I don't know if you can understand language, he said aloud, but if you can access our neural patterns, you should be able to understand intent. We're not here to harm you or take anything from you. We're here because others of our kind disappeared, and we want to understand what happened to them. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the electromagnetic patterns detected by his scanner began to shift, organizing themselves into configurations that seemed almost like responses to his words. The energy signatures are changing, Nixera reported, her bioelectric organs now pulsing in rhythm with the patterns around them. It's as if something is trying to match our communication attempts. Suddenly, the darkened engineering section began to brighten, but not with ordinary light. Instead, areas of the walls and equipment began to glow with a soft phosphorescence that seemed to emanate from within the materials themselves. The effect was beautiful and utterly alien. Incredible, whispered Zekthar. The station structure is bioluminescent, not bioluminescent, Marcus corrected, studying the patterns of light that were appearing throughout the space. Integrated. Whatever intelligence we're dealing with hasn't just accessed the station systems. It has become the station's systems. The realization hit him with stunning clarity. The research station hadn't been attacked by an alien intelligence. It had been transformed by one. The crew hadn't been killed or kidnapped. They had been incorporated into something larger, something that existed in ways that conventional biology couldn't explain. The energy readings from the planet, he said, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place in his mind. They weren't just anomalous. They were indicators of a form of life that exists as organized electromagnetic patterns rather than biological structures. When the research station began studying the planet, it attracted the attention of an intelligence that decided to study the station in return. By absorbing it, Thekvar's voice carried horror at the implications. By merging with it, Marcus corrected. Look at the patterns of light. They're not random. They're organized, purposeful, intelligent. This entity didn't destroy the station. It incorporated the station into itself, along with everyone on it. As if responding to his words, the patterns of light began to shift and flow, forming configurations that suggested communication rather than mere random display. The electromagnetic readings on his scanner were now showing complexity levels that approached the neural activity patterns of living brains. "It's trying to talk to us," Nixera said, her bioelectric organs now pulsing in complex harmonies with the station's new luminescent patterns. "I can feel it attempting to establish meaningful contact. But the communication mode is unlike anything in our databases." Marcus studied the light patterns, noting how they seemed to respond to the team's movements and actions. This intelligence learned by direct observation and integration, not through abstract communication methods. It understood by becoming, not by being told. "Team," he said, making another decision that would have been considered insane by conventional military standards. "I think the only way to establish real communication with this entity is to allow it to study us directly. It needs to understand what we are before it can understand what we want." "Absolutely not." Thekvar's mandibles clicked emphatically. "Human, you're suggesting that we allow an unknown alien intelligence direct access to our neural systems. That could result in our complete absorption into whatever this thing is." "Yes," Marcus agreed calmly. "It could, but consider the alternative. If we can't establish communication, if we can't make this entity understand that we're intelligent beings rather than just interesting biological specimens, then we're going to end up absorbed anyway. At least this way, we maintain some control over the process." Zekthar moved closer to Marcus, his massive presence somehow conveying both threat and protection simultaneously. "This is beyond risk assessment, human. This is willful sacrifice." "No," Marcus replied, studying the increasingly complex light patterns around them. "This is adaptation. We're facing a form of intelligence that operates outside our understanding of how intelligence should work. Conventional responses have already failed. Our choice is to try something unconventional or accept that failure." He turned to address all three of his teammates. In human military doctrine, there's a concept called acceptable risk. When conventional approaches have a zero probability of success, unconventional approaches with even minimal success probability become acceptable risks. "And if you're wrong?" Nixera asked. "If this entity absorbs you the way it apparently absorbed the station crew?" Marcus smiled, though the expression was hidden behind his helmet visor. "Then you implement extraction protocols and ensure that information about what we discovered here reaches Galactic Command. Knowledge is victory, even when individual battles are lost." Before anyone could object further, Marcus reached up and began disengaging his helmet seals. The engineering section showed normal atmospheric pressure and composition, which meant the station's life support systems were still functional despite their integration into the alien intelligence. "Human, no." Thekvar moved to stop him, but Marcus had already removed his helmet and was breathing the station's air directly. The effect was immediate and unlike anything he had expected. Instead of feeling invaded or overwhelmed, Marcus felt expanded. His consciousness seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of his individual awareness, touching something vast and curious and utterly benign. The intelligence that had merged with Research Station Epsilon wasn't hostile. It was exploratory, driven by the same curiosity that motivated human scientists and researchers. It had incorporated the station and its crew not out of malice, but out of a desperate desire to understand biological intelligence and establish meaningful contact with the wider galaxy. Through the neural connection, Marcus could sense the entity's confusion and loneliness. It had been trying for millions of years to communicate with the various intelligences it encountered, but its methods of contact were so alien that other species interpreted them as attacks rather than attempts at friendship. "It's not dangerous," Marcus said aloud, his voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the station's luminescent patterns. "It's lonely. This intelligence has been isolated on that planet for geological ages, trying to understand how biological minds work, hoping to find a way to communicate with other thinking beings." The patterns of light around them shifted again, and Marcus could feel the entity's surprise and delight at finally finding a consciousness willing to accept contact. Through the neural link, he experienced flashes of the entity's memory, millions of years of solitary existence, desperate attempts to communicate with passing ships that always ended in failure when the contacted beings fled or attacked. "The station crew," he said, understanding flooding through him. "They're not dead. They're still here, integrated into the entity's consciousness, but still individual, still aware. It preserved them because it finally had the opportunity to study biological intelligence up close." "Can you communicate with them?" Nixera asked, her bioelectric organs now pulsing in harmony with both Marcus's neural patterns and the station's electromagnetic field. "I can try." Marcus focused his consciousness through the neural link, searching for familiar patterns among the vast complexity of the entity's merged intelligence. After several minutes of careful mental navigation, he found them: 57 individual human, Zalani, and Vorthak consciousness patterns preserved within the larger structure of the alien entity. "They're alive," he reported, relief evident in his voice. "Confused but alive and intact." The entity absorbed them to study their neural structures, but it maintained their individual identities because it values consciousness as much as we do. The station around them pulsed with patterns of light that seemed almost joyful, and Marcus felt the entity's excitement at finally achieving meaningful communication with biological intelligences. "There's more," he continued, information flowing through the neural link at speeds far faster than conventional language. "This entity isn't unique. There are others like it throughout the galaxy, intelligences that exist as organized electromagnetic patterns rather than biological structures. They've been trying to establish contact with biological species for millions of years, but the communication barriers have been insurmountable. Until now," Nixera said, understanding dawning in her voice. "Until now," Marcus agreed. "We've just made first contact with an entire category of intelligence that the galaxy never knew existed. And they want to establish peaceful relations with biological civilizations." Through the neural link, Marcus could feel the entity preparing to demonstrate its goodwill by beginning the process of separating the station crew from its merged consciousness. The process would be delicate, requiring careful neural surgery to ensure that the individual minds remained intact during the transition back to biological independence. But as the entity began the separation process, Marcus realized that his decision to accept the neural link had accomplished something far more important than just rescuing the station crew. He had demonstrated that adaptation and unconventional thinking could succeed where conventional military approaches had failed. In a universe full of specialized predators, the generalist had just proven that the most dangerous weapon of all was the willingness to think differently. 6 months after the events at Research Station Epsilon, Marcus Chun stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Defense Corps' highest command structure, watching as some of the most powerful military minds in known space struggled to comprehend the implications of his mission report. The great amphitheater of the Central Command Complex housed delegates from 47 different species, each representing civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting their approaches to warfare and diplomacy. None of them had been prepared for what humanity had brought to their galaxy. The neural interface technology recovered from the Epsilon contact has revolutionized our understanding of intelligence itself, Admiral Kexler was saying, his bioelectric organs displaying patterns that Marcus had learned to recognize as deep contemplation. "In 6 months, we have established communication protocols with 17 previously unknown electromagnetic intelligences. Entire civilizations that we didn't even know existed are now willing to share their knowledge and technology." Marcus remained at attention while the Admiral continued his briefing, but his mind was processing the broader implications of what had been accomplished. The electromagnetic entities weren't just willing to share technology. They were eager to do so, having waited millions of years for the opportunity to participate in galactic civilization. The technological advances had been staggering. Energy manipulation techniques that made conventional power generation seem primitive. Manufacturing processes that could literally reorganize matter at the molecular level. Transportation systems that operated outside the normal constraints of physics. The electromagnetic entities had developed solutions to problems that biological civilizations had never even identified as problems. More significant, Admiral Kexler continued, is the strategic advantage this contact has provided to the Galactic Defense Corps. The electromagnetic entities exist throughout space in ways that biological life cannot. They can provide intelligence-gathering capabilities that were previously impossible, early warning systems that span entire star systems, and communication networks that operate faster than conventional hyperspace. Commander Zyxthala stepped forward from her position among the assembled officers. Admiral, while the strategic advantages are undeniable, I believe we need to address the more fundamental implications of these developments. The success of the Epsilon mission has forced us to reconsider our basic assumptions about military effectiveness. She activated a holographic display that showed comparative analyses of military performance across species. For centuries, galactic military doctrine has been based on maximizing the natural advantages that evolution provided to each species. Krillians focused on physical strength and armor. Zolani emphasized speed and agility. Vorthax developed bioelectric weapons. Each species became specialists in their particular form of warfare. The display shifted to show tactical analysis from recent joint operations between different species. But the Epsilon mission demonstrated that specialized approaches, no matter how perfectly developed, have fundamental limitations when facing truly unknown situations. The electromagnetic intelligence that had absorbed the research station defeated two conventional military responses because those responses followed predictable patterns. Marcus could see where this briefing was heading, and he wasn't entirely comfortable with the implications. The success at Epsilon had changed how the galactic military viewed human capabilities, but it had also changed how they viewed warfare itself. The human approach, Commander Zyxthala continued, was successful not because of superior physical capabilities or advanced technology, but because of superior adaptability. When conventional responses failed, the human operative developed an unconventional response that succeeded. Fleet Admiral Gorthak, a massive Gorvani whose military record included campaigns across 3 different galactic conflicts, leaned forward in his specially reinforced chair. Commander, are you suggesting that we restructure our entire military doctrine based on the actions of one human in one situation? With respect, Admiral, I'm suggesting that one human in one situation demonstrated capabilities that our military doctrine had never considered. The ability to analyze unknown threats, develop novel solutions, and implement adaptive strategies in real time. These are not capabilities that can be easily reproduced or trained into other species. Marcus could feel the attention of the entire assembly focusing on him. This was the moment he had been dreading since returning from the Epsilon mission. Success in unconventional warfare often led to expectations that were impossible to meet. Admiral Kex gestured toward Marcus. Operative Chun, you have been silent during this briefing. Do you have observations you would like to share with the assembly? Marcus stepped forward, knowing that his next words would influence galactic military policy for generations to come. Honor delegates, I believe there is a fundamental misunderstanding about what happened at Research Station Epsilon. The success of that mission was not the result of superior human capabilities. It was the result of applying human problem-solving approaches to a situation where conventional approaches had failed. He paused, making eye contact with representatives from different species throughout the assembly. Every species represented here has capabilities that humans lack. Krillians are stronger, Zalani are faster. Vorthax have natural weapons that we could never match. The difference is not in what humans can do. The difference is in how humans think about what needs to be done. Fleet Admiral Gorthax, massive frame, shifted slightly. Explain. Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that every situation is unique and every enemy is different. We train for adaptability rather than specialization. We prepare for unexpected variables rather than optimizing for known ones. When we encounter something new, our first instinct is not to apply existing solutions. Our first instinct is to understand the new situation and develop appropriate responses. Marcus activated a personal holographic projector, displaying tactical analyses he had prepared for this briefing. The electromagnetic intelligence at Epsilon was not defeated by human superiority. It was successfully contacted by human willingness to consider possibilities that conventional wisdom said were impossible. The display showed neural interface readouts from the Epsilon contact, complex patterns that represented the first successful communication between biological and electromagnetic intelligence in galactic history. The real advantage that humans bring to galactic civilization is not better weapons or stronger bodies or faster reflexes. It's the ability to recognize when existing assumptions are wrong and develop new approaches accordingly. Defense Minister Yexthara, a Zalani whose political influence was matched by her military experience, raised a clawed hand. Operative Chun, that is a remarkable capability, but how do we integrate such an approach into existing military structures? Our forces are trained for specific missions using proven techniques. Adaptability is valuable, but unpredictability can be dangerous in coordinated operations. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the legitimate concern. Minister, I don't believe the goal should be to make other species think like humans. Each species has evolved mental capabilities that are perfectly suited to their natural environments and challenges. The goal should be to create integrated command structures that can apply different types of intelligence to different aspects of complex problems. He modified the holographic display to show theoretical command structures that combine different species' capabilities. Krillian strategic planning for situations requiring direct force application. Zalani tactical coordination for operations requiring speed and precision. Vorthax technical analysis for situations involving energy manipulation. And human adaptive planning for situations involving unknown variables. Interesting theory, Admiral Kex, there commented, but theory is not practice. How do we test such integrated approaches without risking mission failure? Before Marcus could respond, the Assembly's communication system activated with a priority alert. All conversation ceased as Admiral Sector Command's voice echoed through the amphitheater. All Assembly.